Yeah, we are going to shift gear a little bit here. I also just want to start like Greg did with some reflection about how did I get into sustainability. That's one thing I want to reflect on. Then I want to reflect on the city of LA and the obligation that you have. My husband and I, we moved here 1 year ago, but I actually went to high school in Newport Beach for many years ago. And I think for you who come from California, I think if you compare California with the rest of the world, you are very fortunate. And just like we are very fortunate, we come from Denmark, and as might know, some of you know, that is #1 country in the world on the SDGs and on climate. But you can choose two roles in life. One role is just to sit and enjoy or be lucky that you was born in a great place, or you can take all the things that you are doing in that place and help the rest of the world, right? That's those two ways of doing things. And that is why I reflect on my own journey into sustainability. So I have been working for SAP for 21 years, a technology company. And when you heard Greg speak, Greg is not just a typical chief sustainability officer. He is a digital chief sustainability officer. He's a data-driven chief sustainability officer, right? And this is not the typical chief sustainability officer, so the role have changed. So, but if you just park that for 2 seconds, so I had the opportunity to move to Silicon Valley for around 10 years ago, and that was at the time where everything was about exponential technologies. And you all, the Singularity University and you AI and blockchain and so on and so forth. And you all know that there was no limit for how we were dreaming in Silicon Valley. And did that just inspire California? No, it was inspiring the whole world. And I remember at SAP, my role was to have incubators into Silicon Valley for the biggest companies around the world to innovate. And we also know that, I remember Tesla was just on the other side of where SAP, where I worked for, had their office on the Stanford ground. And it was like probably some of my best time in my life because it was one big playing ground. So I wrote a book at that time. It was about Innovation 1.0, where I kind of thought, you know, this is the maker of innovation. This is the soul of Silicon Valley and it's helping the world. But what does that mean? And that is where I realized that every single city around the world have a soul of how to innovate. So if you go to New York or you go to London, or if you go to Johannesburg, wherever you go in the world, there's a specific soul there of a specific knowledge that can enable and build certain things. So that is what I call Innovation 2.0. I wrote a little bit about that, book around that. And then I had the opportunity to go to New York. It was not something I wanted to do, but I was asked by the CEO at that time to go to New York and build up a big innovation space. It was around 2015-16 at Hudson Yards. And it was a whole new piece of New York for you who know it. Hudson Yards is a beautiful, beautiful place, end of the High Line. And I moved there. I remember the first year I was part of building up that mecca of innovation space. And I was kind of thinking, innovation New York City never ever going to happen. It is in Silicon Valley, all that is going on. But then I got an aha moment. And that was that, why are we innovating? What are we innovating for? What are we trying to achieve? And this is where we all get super embarrassed when we think about that. So at that time, I've been in the technology industry for around 18 years, been doing SAP implementations all over the world. But have I ever at one point thought about doing a sustainable way of implementing an SAP solutions? For you who know SAP, they cover 78% of all business transactions in the world. So any kind of supply chain procurement process, it touches SAP. So that means that most, as of today, do not have a sustainable way of running business processes whatsoever. So, and that's where I realized Innovation 3.0 is about when you innovate with all those exponential technologies, just like it was told by Greg, you do it for a bigger purpose in life. And that is, you do it for impact and purpose in the 17 global goals. That's why you do it. That's why Tesla invented what they invented. That's why we invent what we invent, not because of cool tech. You don't love cool tech, but we do it for a bigger purpose in mind. And that's where I got into big issues, because if you want to event and drive impact, if you want to digitalize the entire energy sector, is that a linear thinking? I don't think so. That is literally what we call a science fiction mindset that you need to have. So that was where I wrote a book, Innovation 4.0, a science fiction book, and the book was about LA. And it's a history book that goes from New York to LA and the role of LA. And at the time I launched the book, I had no idea that I was going to live in LA, as we do now, me and my husband. So why do LA play a role in this? So what is the soul of LA? Coming from outside, I'm not born here, I'm lucky to be here, lucky to go to high school here, is that LA has a way of dreaming. I call it the La La Land. And for you who travel a lot, you must admit there's nothing better than coming home to LA, right? Great, it's great to be out, but coming back to LA, it has a certain feel to it. So that fortune that you have being in LA, and you heard both when Greg was speaking and when Victoria was speaking, those incredible sustainability projects they are running for LA, for the city, and down to what Greg is doing. We are very fortunate to be able to do this in LA. And I was running a huge setup at COP26, and I was hosting the C40 network and also Resiliency Network, which is two big networks with mayors. And I know that LA came, and I know they came and spoke about what they do, just like the mayor of Miami did and the mayor of Houston did. So in United States, you have some incredible cities that is moving the needle. The fun fact about COP26 was that nobody 1 month before COP took place had invited any mayor or any governor of the United States. So I got a call 3 weeks before COP26 because it happened in Scotland, and I'm heavily involved with UN, and Wood is a Scottish company, one of the biggest Scottish companies. And I was asked to create a 2 weeks program for governors and mayors, and I don't know what, to navigate, because people haven't invited them. And that is interesting to think about, because when you think about infrastructure and resiliency, and you think about living in, especially going through COVID, in a city where we feel safe, the role of a mayor, the role of the city, have never been more important as it is of today. And that's the reason why you begin to see the private sector setting up some very strong partnerships with the mayors. And you also see, you might be aware, for example, Google are right now building up new areas in San Francisco, like new districts and so on. So you see the tech companies going in and playing a very big role. So I wanted to start with that, just a little bit of reflection about the role of LA. So what I want to give to you today, and I'll just look at a few slides, is that you have two things you can do. Just enjoy your life in LA, which is great. But you can also take and use LA just like we did way back in Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley today is not the biggest on sustainable technology solutions. But what if LA, with the fantasy of the La La mindset and the greatness of what you're doing, could build a huge amount of technology startups within the sustainability space that can inspire the world? Because one thing is for sure, which we also learned under COVID, is that it's not enough that LA is doing fine. It's not going to move the issue with the 1.5 at all. It's going to be great here, but it's not going to be great around the world. And at COP, we saw that when the head of state was doing their commitment to 1.5, there's a lot of conversation about Modi from India, why he couldn't do the same commitment as the other head of states. But excuse me, living in India is a whole other thing than living here in LA or United States, right? So you always need to take into consideration the country and the city that you're in. Okay, so by this, I just want to go through a few slides here, see if I can see it here. And this is a good leading into the next thing. We can do incredible well here in LA, and we will, because we are obligated to do so. And we want to inspire the rest of the world, right? So that was the reason why I was happy to hear when Victoria said that LA stood up with the C40 and inspired the others mayors. That's the obligation you have when you're born in a place and live in a place who have a lot of resources, and you do a lot of great things that we can like in LA. But the fact of reality, and you probably follow the IPCC report, is that even though that we since 2015 have been trying to really get it right with the climate situation and all the 17 global goals, we are literally going backwards. And that's the interesting, why are we going backwards? Why can't we figuring it out? If you go into LinkedIn and just look for the last 2 years, how many people have not updated their profile to be climate something, sustainability something? There's so many people involved in this now, but we still can't get it right. And the concerning thing is, because they're a couple of months old, is this one here. So right now, as we speak, the High Political Forum is happening in New York. And the High Political Forum, if you don't know what that is, every year in July, UN take a huge meeting over a couple of weeks, and they literally do an assessment about how well is the world doing on sustainability. So that report came out July the 7th, and that just talk about how we are going backwards. It's talk about things that become worse. And you might think, I don't get that. I work on this every single day. Why is this getting worse? The two things you need to think about here is that the journey we are on, why science fiction mindset is so essential, is complicated. It's difficult. We spoke about in the beginning about, we don't need fossil fuel, but excuse me, do you have something that can replace it? No, we don't. Okay, hold a moment. Let us figuring out how we do a good transition, right? Another thing is that we're doing good here. We're fine here in LA. We're fine in Denmark. Yeah, but is the world okay? Have we solved it globally? No, we haven't. And this is what that report, so when UN talk about, and you heard about it because Joe Biden also used it in his campaign, build back better, don't leave anybody behind. That is actually what we need to think about. Don't leave any country, any city, anything behind, because this is the consolidated result that is coming out here. So this is really good reading, and also just have a broader understanding about where the world is heading around the sustainability goals. When we think about climate, because often people talk about climate and say, oh yeah, this is all this fossil fuel, and you see it's a windmill and solar, and then we're fine. No, climate change, I know we have a couple of people from the fashion industry here, right? Climate change is everything change, right? Everything we wear, eat, do, furniture, everything is impacted by this climate change. And I love that you came in hardcore said it's all about education. This is exactly what it's about. We literally do not understand what we're talking about here. We don't understand when we say we don't want fossil fuel anymore. Okay, fine. What does that mean? What kind of impact is this going to have? We're speaking about things you don't understand. Secondly, what I loved about what Victoria showed is that she showed the people of LA how to get engaged, because there's the next big question. Okay, I want to do something. What can I do? Tell me, what can I do, right? In Denmark, and I know it's also happening more and more here in LA, learning about the 17 global goals, you start at the kindergarten, then you go to schools, then you go to whatever kind of education. It's embedded into all level of teaching in Denmark. You have it advertised all over the city. It's part of the daily living to be sustainable and impact driven. It's a mindset. And that's the first thing, because that's why I got super embarrassed when I moved to New York and I dedicated that big innovation space I was asked to build for SAP. I said, I'm not just going to do innovation in New York. The soul of New York is impact, because you have UN there. So I'm going to do innovation with purpose. And that is innovation 2.0 together with a sci-fi mindset, innovation 4.0, because then I can think big enough. And when you first begin to work with UN, and that's why if you haven't yet got into the UN system, how many of your companies here are member of UN Global Compact? Okay, first thing to do when you leave this room, because you can say you're impact driven if you do not consolidate your impact to the bigger purpose of UN. When you first get into this, you begin to realize the bigger responsibility you have as a human being, being in this world, right? But back to what you said, it's about transparency and education, and break it down so we all really understand it. But remember, climate change is an everything change. Another thing I want to mention, and this is, I work for an engineering consulting company, 40,000 people. We work with all this great solar, wind, hydrogen, and carbon capture and storage. And we are like all over the world. What I want to talk about the energy trends, because that's something that I have been on a journey myself with. So when you are here in California, here in LA, it's great. You see the old oil pumps. You see the big, you see solar, wind. You kind of see everything. You see the big oil rigs, right? And we have a lot to say about the big energy fossil fuel companies that we all are relying on today. And we spoke about just before we started the meeting here today, we always need to follow the money. So what is exactly happening right now? So in a couple of years, you will see the whole energy sector be split into three pieces. One is that you have the big oil and gas companies that is right now totally transitions into renewable, and they do an incredible job to do so. But we all need to understand this is complicated. This is not just a fix over. We're talking about in this entire sector be digitalized. For you who are into tech, it takes time to digitalize an entire industry, especially an industry that has so much impact into other industries. So that's one thing that is happening. Another thing that is happening is that the amount of money that right now are coming from pension funds, family offices, investing, going into funds in general. So we have, I work with a company called Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners, happens to be Denmark. They are running some of the biggest infrastructure projects in United States with offshore wind and also with hydrogen in Chile and so on. So right now you see big venture companies coming in and they are just deploying and building new, right? So they will have a piece of the energy market going forward. And then if you look at the digitalization, what happens when you digitalize? And Greg gave some incredible examples. What happened when you digitalize? What is the role of technology when you go in and digitalize an entire sector? What would the role be of the technology providers? They will have a very big role, right? So you will see going forward that the big software companies like the Google, the Microsoft, the SAP, Salesforce, so on and so forth, they will be big energy resources going forward, and also unknown technology companies. Because when you digitalize an industry, the technology becomes the essence of how the work is done. And you saw so cool with all the examples that were showed before. And that's why you can say the trends within the energy sector is that we go from where the energy mainly comes from the big fossil fuel companies that will transition into renewable, into where they will have a piece, then you have all these capital funds that will run a lot of all the renewable, and then you will also have the big technology companies and unknown technology companies owning a big portion of the energy resources. So it's going to be a very interesting industry to watch going forward, including, I will also say, it will have an impact on all other industries. So I just wanted to mention that. A second thing I want to mention, that is good frameworks to know. And that was great to hear when they both were talking, because the worlds are really doing a lot to help everybody in coming together about how to drive impact. So there is a framework that is called the Corporate Nights. It comes out in January every single year, and it talks about the most sustainable companies in the world. And I'm not saying it because I'm Danish, because Denmark have always been number 1, 2, and 3, Ørsted and Vestas, and all those great companies. But there are actually great US companies that is getting up and into this here now also. This year, for a CEO, this Corporate Night Index is like crazy important, because there's a C-suite movement going on now within sustainability. Most CEOs today, if you see your own CEOs in your own companies, they have a 1.5 ambition, right? When anywhere they go, they talk about what they're doing in that space. So this is something that is super important. But what you saw on the first slide is that doing good, doing sustainability, becoming a net zero business is actually good business. So what we need, and I'm pretty sure when we look into the clothing industry, you begin to see new buying behaviors. We talked a lot about Tesla and other similar cars in that sector, is that people begin to change behavior. People are making new decisions. And if you look at the young generation coming out, it's kind of funny if you speak to, and a couple of very young people here, when I talk to you, you kind of think, why in the world could you think about not doing sustainable purchase? I mean, where did that come from? My generation, we lived in a world that was not sustainable at all, right? We are the people behind the plastic, right? We are all the guilty people. So we are transition. But if you look at the young generation, they don't need to be transformed or get a new mindset. They have a whole new buying behavior. So there's a lot of companies now, of the big companies, that is actually going in, and there's a company called A.P. Møller Mærsk, big shipping company. If you look at that industry, they want to be net zero by 2050, just like LA want to be net zero by 2050. They actually said, no, we want to be by 2040, because we want to be able to build new business. We want to actually compete up against other shipping companies, because our clients want to make sure that they get a net zero transportation from A to B. So there's a lot. So becoming a sustainable business and become net zero is not just, oh, I need to because of regulations. You can actually redesign your entire business model and really begin to get a big piece of the sustainability economy that is being building up. Then there is the 17 global goals. And there is what you call the world to-do list. And the way I just want you to think about this, the 17 global goals that UN came up with, they are like indicators of what you need to do. If you think about what am I going to do? You heard very nicely from Victoria and Greg about, okay, they know to want to be net zero by 2050. They know their target for circular economy. The next thing was, what are you going to do about this? Everything they showed was things they were going to do about it. The thing about what I'm going to do about it is the most difficult thing. And why am I saying that? And that's the last thing I want to talk about to you here, is that, so when I was at SAP and I was running this huge innovation with purpose space at Hudson Yard, we had companies from all over the world coming in. And it was all about, we are committed to impact and we are really good in communicating about it, right? If you also if you drive around LA, a lot of the advertisement is about plant-based something or sustainable something, right? Right? So the interesting thing here is that if you look at the green part, we are so good in having a CEO in a mission vision statement. I'm pretty sure if I go into any of your sites, you have a great mission vision statement about sustainability, right? You got that right. The next thing is that you need to make sure you have a C-suite who understand that that's education. That's complicated because suddenly you need to invest in something you don't totally understand, and it might not be great because you maybe need to redesign a product that has an additional cost. You know, you are in the middle of what is this a good idea? Education. Then where the trouble first comes is your corporate reporting. So the dashboard that the CEO have in the company now want to have emission measurements. Let me ask you one question. We lived in a world until recently where we did not design solutions or products or cities or anything with a sustainable mindset. How many of the data do you think exists today that is needed to measure your emission 1, 2, and 3? They're not existing. So when people kind of say, oh, where's the data? I'm like, there's nothing to be surprised about because we did not design things like this, right? And I can be the first one to say so because I was part of co-creating the SDG ambition. It took 3 years to do together with UN because I knew there was something wrong here. And I did a mapping of this up against the SAP software technology stack. And I did it later after with some of the other enterprise software companies. If you look into the climate area, and Bill Gates have come out and John Kerry have actually come out and said the same thing the last 1.5 years. There's a 75% technology gap. If you go into circular economy, there is around a 45% technology gap. And they say, what can that be? Because, you know, Silicon Valley explains the technologies. But listen here, the technology is there. But just because you have the technology doesn't mean you have the solution, right? And Greg gave us a really good example. everything they've been building, the technology was there, but nobody had been thinking about the solutions, right? So a lot of stuff needs to be built and a lot of data needs to be entered into the system and extracted into real time. Okay, that's the green part. The other side over here, okay, we can do some really good branding about this because we need to, because the CEO needs to look great, the company needs to look great itself, right? I'll go to market, get it. But the first trouble we run into is the greenwashing, as you also heard a lot about, right? And the trust. I tell you, if anybody catch you in not being totally compliant and trustworthy on your sustainability commitment, it's not good. And let me tell you how the math add up here. All companies, remember your global compact, that is most of the top 1,000 of the biggest companies in the world today. You can go in, look them up, public available information, and you can see exactly what they've committed and a signature by the CEO of the company. They are never going to pull out because you're never going to pull out of UN, for sure not, right? This is the highest level you can get to on purpose. So you need to make sure that you live by the 10 principles, which is about human rights, it's about how if you go to into the clothing industry, I mean, where is the clothes produced? How do you recycle it and all that stuff, or whatever product you're in, right? So you need to make sure your end-to-end supply chain, who you work with, is totally compliant. It's not enough that you are, but you need to make sure who you work with is. If you go to the middle, that is the difficult part. And that is really what I hear in the city of LA is doing really well. How do you put this into action? How do you make sure that every single project within your company has sustainability embedded? How do you make sure that every single product that you create, no matter what industry you are in, make sure that the whole sustainability is embedded into how you operate your business? That is the tough part. And that's where education comes in again. Because I work a lot with go from the C-suite into the company itself. And we should speak to the chief technology officer, you speak to the program officer, wherever you speak to, and you say, oh, I know the company has signed up to 1.5, so what are you doing about this? And then they often say, we don't do anything because the chief technology officer, the chief sustainability officer take care. We just need to remember one thing. A chief sustainability officer, until probably 1 year ago, was a person that not too many people was really, into, it was more nice, right? It was more nice to, and they don't come with a heavy technology background. They don't come with a heavy business management, consulting, whatever background. No, they come with a whole other skill set. And every single employee within the company needs to walk the talk, right? So I always turn around and say, listen here, I don't think the CEO of this company know more than you know about this topic because that is your expertise. You need to ask the question back and say, what can I do? So the whole SDG ambition implementation framework is a framework to help companies really get into the weed about sustainability. The last thing I want to mention is that the 17 global goals is great, but who is member of UN? Who's member of UN? Countries. Who is the 17 global goals created for? Countries. So people are sitting and studying the 17 global goals. They can't really get it to work. No, because you're not a country. You can if you are a city, but you cannot if you are a private sector company. So we took the 17 global goals and we translated them into SDG ambition for the private sector. And the most known one that we spoke about earlier today is this one, the science-based target 1.5, which came out of the Paris Agreement. And the last thing, I'm not going to go into this in detail, but just so you understand, and all of this is available on the UN Global Compact side. For you to go in and implement and become a net zero company, there is a whole detailed description about what you need to do, how you measure, how you put it into your different business process layer down to data model, enterprise architecture. I'm just telling you, it is difficult and there's no quick fix here. And that's the reason why my last note when I give talks is that this is going to be a very long journey. And we need to be very humble about it. And we need to understand the role of technology is going to play a very big role, not because I'm a tech person, but it is. And that's also the reason why be realistic, make realistic plan, never overpromise on this here, have a good roadmap. The roadmap is long. That's the reason why, and the last thing I'm going to say, and I'll shut up. There's never been a greater moment in life where science fiction is become a reality for every single corporation in the world. Because when did the last CEO go in and do a 250 plan on a net zero goal they can never get out of? That is a total science fiction moonshot, right? Because they have no idea how they're going to get there, right? But we will help. And you can see the city of LA have a really good plan. So we live a great place here, but we need to help the world.